evening, I'm Cynthia Ng and this is AWANI Tonight. We are continuing the live coverage of a landslide that occurred this evening in Ampang Jaya. More on that coming up. Five victims are believed to be involved in a landslide that hit Taman Bukit Permai 2, Ampang Jaya, earlier this evening. One victim has been rescued and Astro was just informed that 4 more are believed to be missing. What you're seeing on screen right now are the live visuals of the landslide in Ampang Jaya, and Selangor Fire and Rescue Department Director told us earlier that the incident occurred at about 5:54 p.m. today, with emergency personnel arriving at the scene at 6 p.m. The first victim was rescued at 6:54 p.m. At least a dozen houses and 11 vehicles on the street were affected. Rescue operations, as you're seeing on the screen, are still ongoing to search for the other victims. We are continuing our live coverage on the scene at Ampang Jaya on all our social media platforms, and for the latest updates as well, head on to astroawani.com. The management of Smart Tunnel says that it had only utilized a third of its overall capacity during the heavy downpour on Monday that caused flooding in several parts of Kuala Lumpur. It said that the tunnel had diverted over 1 million cubic meters of flood waters, but the areas affected on that day were not under its alleviation zone.
In a statement, it said that the badly hit areas in Kuala Lumpur on March 7 suffered from 2 contributing factors: insufficient carrying capacity at rivers, particularly Sungai Kerayong, Sungai Bunos and Sungai Kuyoh, which are outside of the Smart Tunnel flood alleviation zone, and intense rain overwhelming the local drainage networks in these areas. This had in turn caused the flash floods in surrounding areas such as Kuchai Lama and Jalan Klang Lama. In comparison, it said catchment areas which the SMART project serves experienced relatively less rainfall intensity compared to the other areas that were hit by the flash floods on that day. It also called for a holistic flood mitigation project to quickly be undertaken, especially for northwestern Kuala Lumpur, in order to cope with climate change.
Malaysia will review the current fuel subsidy program to target those who are really in need to reduce the financial burden on the government. Finance Minister Datuk Seri Tengku Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz says this is due to the sharp rise in global crude oil prices, exacerbated by the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. He said under the current program, the same subsidized prices are enjoyed by all, regardless of rich or poor, adding that the high-income group will enjoy more subsidies based on consumption levels, which are larger compared to those on low income. Tengku Zafrul revealed that currently, the government subsidized up to 45% for RON 95 petrol.
Sebagai contoh, setiap kali kita pergi stesen pam minyak dan kita mengisi minyak dengan nilai RM100 atau kira-kira 49 liter, dan kita mengisi minyak dengan nilai RM100 yang tadilah 49 liter, jumlah yang dibayar oleh kerajaan adalah sebanyak RM81. Kerana jumlah kos sebenar berdasarkan harga pasaran adalah RM181 bagi 49 liter RON 95. Ini bermaksud subsidi kerajaan adalah sehingga 45% daripada jumlah keseluruhan yang perlu dibayar.
Crude oil prices have been rising since 2021. Drawing comparison, Tengku Zafrul said crude oil cost $85 per barrel in January this year. It was $55 per barrel during the same month last year, causing the government to bear a 10-fold increase in the subsidy bill for petrol, diesel and liquefied petroleum gas from 200 million ringgit in January last year to over 2 billion ringgit in January this year. He warned that the Russian invasion of Ukraine further escalated prices. At over $100 per barrel, it is at the highest level seen since 2014. Tengku Zafrul said if this condition persists, it will cost the government more than 2.5 billion ringgit a month and up to a total of 28 billion ringgit a year in subsidies. Pakatan Harapan is open to the idea of extending the MOU with the ruling coalition beyond July 31st, when the MOU expires, says DAP National Organising Secretary Anthony Loh. He adds that Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob does not need to give in to pressure from UMNO President Datuk Seri Ahmad Zahid Hamidi to call for a general election.
Kita tahu bahawa Pakatan Datuk akan tekan, minggu depan akan tekan, buat pilihan raya, bubar parlimen. Saya nak sarankan kepada Yang Berhormat Bera, selepas kita luluskan pindaan perlembagaan berkenaan dengan lompat parti, apatah tidak, kita boleh bincang untuk melanjutkan MOU itu selepas 31 Julai. Ataupun kita boleh dinyatakan bahawa satu MOU 2.0. Kita boleh ada perjanjian. Kita sementara waktu ini, COVID belum reda, belum selesai, kita tangguhkan pilihan raya. Mungkin sehingga akhir tempoh parlimen ini.
Staying on politics, what is the optimal configuration of politics and governance? Dominance or competition? Tonight on Consider This, Sharakutan speaks to Johor BN Chief and Caretaker MB, Datuk Hasni Mohamad, about his vision of politics for the state and the pledges for reform he has made if returned to power. Putrajaya will challenge any attempts to enforce a 62 billion ringgit award by a Spanish arbitrator to the descendants of a defunct Sulu Sultanate. De facto Law Minister Datuk Seri Dr. Wan Junaidi Tuanku Jaafar says a criminal complaint has been filed against the arbitrator.
He explained to the Dewan Rakyat that the Malaysian government does not recognize the claims in arbitration proceedings by the French Arbitration Court in Paris, which ordered Malaysia to pay approximately $14.92 billion to the so-called descendants of the last Sultan of Sulu. According to Wan Junaidi, this was because the appointment of the arbitrator, Dr. Gonzalo Stampa, had been revoked and was no longer legally valid. He denied claims made by the opposition that the government had not done anything to protect the interests and sovereignty of Malaysia.
Malaysia and Indonesia will sign a memorandum of understanding next Thursday for the recruitment of domestic workers from Indonesia into Malaysia. The MOU signing will take place in Bali.
Human Resource Minister Datuk Seri M. Saravanan said he had discussed issues regarding minimum wage, scope of employment and the use of a valid system. His ministry is also in the midst of processing over 200,000 migrant worker applications for all sectors from Bangladesh. Saravanan added that the ministry plans to ratify the 2014 protocol to the International Labour Organization ILO Convention on Forced Labour 1930 to comply with ILO's guidelines, including providing workers a conducive living environment.
The government is currently studying the need to review the ceiling price of COVID-19 rapid self-test kits. This is due to high demand in the market.
Domestic and Consumer Affairs Minister Datuk Seri Alexander Nantalinggi said at the moment, the retail price for RTK antigen self-test kits was fixed at RM19.90 and at RM16 wholesale. The government gazetted the self-test kit as a control item effective from December 1st last year. Face masks were also gazetted as a control item in November 2020 to ensure price stability and availability. Nanta added that the ministry would consider fixing a ceiling price for digital thermometers and oximeters too, if there is a need for it.
We'll take a quick break. Stay with us.
Semua yang terjadi adalah berita, tetapi tiada siapa yang boleh bawakan yang terkini dan tergempar seperti kami.
Dilihat hanya memberi wang tanpa matlamat yang tepat. Dia tidak melakukan apa-apa kesalahan.
Untuk mendapatkan jawapan yang bermakna, kita perlu soalan yang tepat.
Amat sedih dengan apa yang berlaku ke atas.
Tiada ruang untuk berita palsu.
Negara kita telah merekodkan kes harian baru sebanyak
hanya fakta yang diberikan.
Amat penting untuk meneruskan perjuangan negara melawan pandemik ini.
Sentiasa memastikan suara anda, suara rakyat didengari.
Kenapa?
Membawakan apa yang penting di mana sahaja anda berada.
Kerana kita hendak putuskan rantaian jangkitan.
Belanjawan dan pendekatan bertemakan survival ini secara keseluruhan.
Teruskan bersama kami, Astro AWANI, saluran berita yang paling dipercayai rakyat Malaysia.
Kita berhadapan dengan situasi pandemik yang agak luar.
Welcome back. The foreign ministers of Russia and Ukraine held talks in Turkey today. It is the first high-level meeting between Moscow and Kiev since Russia invaded Ukraine 2 weeks ago. Ukraine Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, however, said the two sides discussed a 24-hour ceasefire but did not make any progress on that. He said Russia was still seeking for full surrender from Ukraine, which is something he said his country will not agree to. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, meanwhile, said that President Vladimir Putin had not ruled out a meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky, but the talks must be of added value. He added that Russia had no plans to attack another country, and he did not believe the conflict would escalate into a nuclear confrontation. Turkey, which has close ties to both Russia and Ukraine, has positioned itself as a neutral party, seeking to facilitate negotiations between both sides. Ukraine has accused Russia of genocide by bombing a children's hospital in the city of Mariupol, a claim that has been rejected by Russia. Russia called the accusation fake news, saying that the building was a former maternity hospital that had long been taken over by soldiers. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky shared video footage showing massive destruction at the hospital in the southern city that has been under assault for 9 days. Officials say 3 people, including a child, died in the bombing. The White House condemned the attack as U.S. lawmakers voted to rush through a $13 billion aid package that would increase military and humanitarian support to Ukraine and its European allies. Meanwhile, the UK has piled on more sanctions on Russia by freezing the assets of 7 Russian businessmen, including the owner of Chelsea Football Club, Roman Abramovich. With the sanctions imposed on Roman Abramovich, the sale of Chelsea is now up in the air, as the sanctions also freeze his ability to sell the club. The UK government has issued what it calls a special license to ensure Chelsea, the current European champions, can continue to play matches and staff can be paid. But the club won't be able to sell new tickets to any fans, sign players, hand out new contracts or sell merchandise. The Russian billionaire had hoped to secure the sale of the club before sanctions were imposed. Abramovich has owned Chelsea since 2003 and has repeatedly denied any current political links to Russian President Vladimir Putin, but has been described by the UK government as a pro-Kremlin oligarch. South Korea has elected conservative opposition candidate Yoon Suk-yeol as the country's next president. In a tightly contested race, Yoon had 48.6% of the votes against his rival Lee Jae-myung, who garnered 47.8%. 61-year-old Yoon will become the first former prosecutor to be elected president in South Korea. He has no prior political experience. The president-elect said he would sternly deal with North Korea's misbehavior and reset ties with China, hinting he would shift back to the hardline posture taken under his conservative predecessors. Some 34 million people voted in the election, which translates to a turnout of 77.1%. Experts say the razor-thin margin means the country is sharply divided and warned that Yoon could face a rocky road ahead trying to unite the two different camps. That is all we have for you on AWANI Tonight. Get all the latest news updates from astroawani.com and the Astro AWANI app. I'm Cynthia Ng. Thank you for watching.